Losing My Religion, It's the End of the World, Everybody Hurts. Huge hits we all know from the iconic band R.E.M. Now a new book is taking us behind the scenes of this 80s alternative rock band. The name of this band is R.E.M. is a biography written by Ames Carlin, showing us why R.E.M. was one of the last great American rock bands of the millennium. And Peter joins me now. Welcome to New Day.
Thank you very much.
Athens, Georgia. What is it about that town?
It's a very small town. A lot of big bands came out of there. B-52s, R.E.M., some lesser known ones that were influential like Love Tractor and Pylon. Essentially, not just because there was a university, but the university had a very influential art school, the Lamar Dodd School of Arts, that had been staffed up in the late 60s and early 70s with a bunch of these kind of hippie bohemian types who had a very kind of out sense of artistry and really taught their students to value kind of expression and experimentation over craft. And that not only went into the visual art, but also into their sense of music. And when the punk scene began, and there was a lot of kind of enlightened amateurs, like sort of thrashing away at instruments, that they sort of took that model and put their own artsy spin on it and created a sound that was in some ways founded on amateurism, but really about passion and artistry.
Well, speaking of that, R.E.M. went from being this college band, indie band, the cult, and then mainstream and really superstar. How did that happen?
They worked extremely hard. And they were not fussy about who they played to. Over the years, early on, a lot of the bands from Athens spent a lot of time just really only trying to focus on big cities and kind of arty bohemian crowds, and R.E.M. would play anywhere. Pizza parlors, gay bars, any place that had like a new wave night in the early 80s. And they just traveled and traveled and traveled, and they also did a really great job of cultivating a fan base on kind of a one-to-one basis. They got to know people, they became very friendly with people, they hung out with them, they went to parties in people's houses, which was also a good place for a hungry young band to find something to eat along the way. And so they worked really hard, they made great music, and it began to kind of resonate, and they built a network of people that really helped spread the message.
I think to your point that they worked really hard is interesting. Obviously, a lot of bands work really hard, but we have to say there was no social media. The carrying the moment, carrying that big hit didn't happen easily.
No, exactly. I mean, that was that was why they went and played in all those different places. I mean, they just worked, 200, 250 nights a year, just constantly on the road, living in a van. And, because that was the way to kind of just build up your fan base just really on a kind of hand-to-hand basis.
And they did make it to the top of that heap, which was no easy doing with those hits like Losing My Religion, Shiny Happy People. How did they hold on to that same artistry and independence that you just talked about through all of that?
From the get-go, they were very determined to never compromise their music. They would work hard, they would do whatever it took, except for allowing themselves to be kind of smoothed down and made acceptable. And so essentially what they did is that they didn't bend to the mainstream, they just worked hard enough and got good enough that the mainstream bent back to them.
I like that visual, that they wouldn't be smoothed down.
Yes, I mean, there were certain ways that they grew and certain ways that they changed. In the beginning, for instance, they refused to do lip sync videos. Michael Stipe, the singer, just drew a hard line, like, I will never do that. But then, in the early 90s, he saw Sinead O'Connor's video for Nothing Compares to You, and saw that that was an amazingly emotional, artistic performance in which she was lip syncing. And when he saw that and put two and two together, that's when they made the video for Losing My Religion, which was another brilliant lip sync video.
It was, absolutely. I just was watching it again last night. R.E.M. had a great influence on Seattle grunge.
That's true.
Tell me about that.
Well, a lot of those bands that came up in the early 90s, from Nirvana, Pearl Jam, the others, I think they saw not only how how emotionally and artistically sophisticated R.E.M.'s music was, but also their success at being able to maintain their vision even as they sort of worked their way into the spotlight. And so the idea that you don't have to sell your soul in order to be successful, really resonated. And, you know, a lot of those guys, I mean, Eddie Vedder,
Yeah.
Kurt Cobain in particular, was very close to Michael Stipe. I mean, and I think that they understood how they had succeeded on both of those levels.
Speaking of lead singer Michael Stipe, let's talk about his influence as inspiring gay and other queer artists to get their music out there and to live a life without shame.
Yes. For the first 10 or so years of their career, when people would ask Michael questions about who his romantic connections were with and all that, he was very, you know, a little vague about it, or just wouldn't want to answer the questions, because as a normal human being, you don't talk about that stuff with strangers.
You didn't back then.
No, you don't, or you certainly didn't.
Yeah.
And so, but then as the years went on, and he had this orientation that kind of went in every direction, as he would say, eventually people began to kind of realize this, and there was this low murmur, so to speak, of what his, you know, sexuality was about. And eventually he decided, well, why shouldn't I talk about this? Like, I can actually be a leader in this. And so by the mid-90s, he came out of the closet in this very kind of out and proud way, and really established himself as an artist who, you know, could live in exactly the way he felt like living, and set an example, I think, for, you know, artists today. Which
went back to the way they started living when they were first starting as a band. I want to ask you, as we wrap this up, any surprises what you learned about R.E.M. as you were researching the book?
I think in some ways the biggest surprise was that Michael, in particular, who could be a little prickly in the early years in interviews and things, because I don't think he enjoyed talking to people along those lines, is actually a really sweet and nice guy, and he's still like very, very close to his high school friends, and keeps in touch, and is a kind person. And you don't associate that, A, with celebrities, and B, with
rock stars and
lead singers and rock stars in rock bands.
I like that.
Yes, it was a nice discovery.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And just a reminder, Peter is holding an author event on Monday, November 11th at 7 p.m. at Third Place Books in Seward Park.